Did we realize or gradually discover that carbon is only 14% of the problem? So it's just a small part of the impact, and it made sense and still makes sense to tackle the next frontier of environmental impact, which is the remaining 86%. And what we at Darwin are pushing in any case is the quantification of physical flows. So it's really about bringing that down to cubic meters of water used, hectares of land occupied, hectares of land converted, kilos of pollutants emitted. Well, they've realized that if they do nothing, in 10 years, 25% of their revenue will be in tatters. I think it's as simple as that, but I believe they've understood that, unfortunately, we're evolving in a world that's increasingly constrained, and that those who, well, we're back to Darwin here, but those who adapt the fastest are the ones destined to survive and successfully evolve in this constrained future.
All right, so your business, is it a regulated business, or what is it that's driving the business right now?
To start with, what truly drives business has never been about regulation. We, for our part, never actually created Darwin as a platform solely for regulatory compliance. This was even back when CSRD was really gaining momentum, about 2 years ago, which, looking back, has proven to be a very good decision. We prefer to position ourselves more from a business perspective, and particularly from the angle of risk management.
Why Darwin?
Why the name Darwin? So Darwin, it's funny, the way we answer this question has actually evolved over the last 2 years. At the very beginning, Darwin, well, quite simply because he's the inventor of biodiversity. It's a point that's actually quite unknown to many. He's the one who theorized biodiversity.
The concept.
Yeah, the genetic biodiversity, the evolution of species. So that's why, quite simply, we say, why not Darwin? And it's true that lately, we've been talking more and more about adaptation, evolution, the fact that to survive in 10 years, you have to adapt, you have to evolve. So it really takes on another dimension and makes the name even more relevant. But it's true that we've rather discovered this second dimension more recently than originally, where we perhaps didn't necessarily have that in mind.
Because the positioning has evolved since you were established. You were established 3 years ago, is that right?
It was a little less than 2 years ago. Fortunately, our positioning has evolved. We truly established ourselves as a biodiversity footprint platform. So biodiversity footprint is a rather obscure term. Footprint means measuring a company's interactions with nature. So what are my impacts? What are my dependencies on the environment? Biodiversity is truly the sum of all interactions with living organisms. So we're talking about pressures on nature, pressures on biodiversity. That's how we introduced ourselves 2 years ago. And we stopped talking about biodiversity because it's a term that's not well understood. People always really think of bees, beehives on rooftops, animals, whereas it's much broader. It encompasses water, what happens at soil level. So it's every type of risk a company has to integrate.
And the initial intuition at the start was that carbon, or rather the measurement of carbon impact was beginning to become widespread in businesses. But you observed that it wasn't sufficient and that it was necessary to go further and specifically evaluate the impacts in terms of biodiversity.
Exactly. In 2024, it was clear to everyone that we must assess our carbon footprint. Well, and actually, we have, did we realize it, or did we gradually come to discover that carbon represents only 14% of the problem, as the IPBES states? So it's just a very small portion of the overall impact, right? And that it makes sense, and it made sense at that moment to tackle the next frontier of environmental impact, which is the remaining 86%. And we make it possible to achieve this 14%, so carbon and all the rest, basically.
And so you were saying the positioning, or at least the way you present Darwin, has evolved.
2 years ago, biodiversity footprint, we assess the impact of dependencies, and we talk about biodiversity. And now we're positioning ourselves more and more, even though that's always been the core idea, as a comprehensive support platform for an environmental strategy. So not just the impact and dependency aspects, but also how it's addressed in a company's risk analysis, how it can be leveraged in reporting, how it can be leveraged in an action plan, a roadmap. So it's much more of an all-in-one solution. And we've stopped talking about biodiversity. We now prefer to discuss the environment because it's a broader concept and it's more easily understood, at least by most of our clients.
And what is it that's driving the business today?
Well, there is still regulation, even though effectively we've seen some setbacks regarding CSRD and on the UDR, which is the anti-deforestation regulation. There have been some setbacks, but there's that element. But there's also, how to put it, the fact that companies are increasingly realizing that there's a real risk linked to their impact and their dependence on nature, and that they must they must manage this risk. They must mitigate this risk. So it's really being driven more and more, in fact, by the business side and by the operational business unit, the finance business unit, and not just the HR business unit, essentially.
Give us a specific example of your company that is.
Well, basically, you have two types of risks related to nature. You have physical risk and transition risk. Physical risk is really linked to your dependencies. So I think a good example is water or water stress. For instance, if you're an agri-food company or a nuclear company, you need water to generate or power various activities of your business. If the water stops, if the river basin you're operating in dries up, then your business activity will stop, or your prices will have to increase. So that's a rather striking example, I find, concerning physical risks. Transition risk then is linked to your environmental impacts. A good example, would really be your risk associated with deforestation. This means imported deforestation. So you're using raw materials that, for instance, in Brazil, have contributed to deforestation, or perhaps chemical pollution. This means you're releasing harmful pollutants into the environment. Consequently, this truly represents a significant reputational risk that could severely impact your business, as we've witnessed recently. This is a good case of transition risk.
And what do you actually bring to the table?
So we specifically measure this risk, both across your operations and sites, and your entire upstream and downstream value chain. We measure it. First, we help you become aware of it, which isn't always obvious for all companies. Once we've done that, it then allows us to develop an adaptation plan or a roadmap, a transition plan. You can call it whatever you like, which truly helps us to manage and reduce this risk overall. So there's the measurement, but measurement is for taking action.
And today, are your clients the end users directly, or do you primarily work for consulting companies that in turn provide services to their own clients?
So indeed, we take an indirect approach. We always work through a partner who is often a consulting firm for several key reasons. The primary reason is that we are still dealing with a topic that is both emerging and quite complex, on which it's truly worthwhile to rely on specialized expertise to come alongside, support, and educate the final clients. And the consulting firm does that extremely well. And the second reason for us, our main objective was really to build a tech company, a data company, and to have the biggest possible impact to really multiply our reach and effect. So precisely, by leveraging these partners, it truly allows us to create a powerful leverage effect and to scale up or expand much more rapidly.
And these partners, they are unable to equip themselves.
Well, so on certain key areas of environmental impact, like, for example, the carbon footprint, we have seen that they are increasingly developing internal tools. So for certain areas, that could be the case. Regarding biodiversity understood as the 5 360 pressures, 360 environmental assessment? No, because you should know that when we press launch computation on Darwin, it activates 250 million data points. So these are really calculations that are very well managed within the platform, but they have a lot of volume and are not within reach.
It's not an Excel macro or an Excel file.
And what else? There's a real complexity.
And how did you develop that internally? Do you have one of your associates who specializes in these subjects?
So there are 3 of us partners. I handle the entire commercial side, so sales, marketing, and HR. That means commercial aspects and certain internal elements. I have a second partner, Antonin Léonard, who brings all the professional expertise. So he spent quite a lot of time, notably with the Caisse des dépôts biodiversité, to develop an impact model called the GBS, the Global Biodiversity Score. He brings a whole methodological background with him. And I have a third associate named Cyprien, who is another engineer, and he brings all the product and tech side. So indeed, we have quite complementary profiles, and it's the combination of these 3 profiles that allowed us to release an MVP product, let's say, relatively quickly.
And your approach, what is it? Is it this methodology? Is it the data that you've already started to aggregate?
Yeah, I think it was, I'm a former investor, and the defensibility and the moat of business models was a question I often asked myself when I was in my previous career. Honestly, I think that data at this stage is not a moat. I think it probably will be eventually, but for there to be true network effects or data network effects, honestly, if they exist, I think we're still some years away.
Where's this data from today?
The data, it's coming from the actual data that we're working with. I mean, well, it's provided directly by the client. So when we create Danone's footprint, I'm taking an example not from our portfolio. There's a part that is Danone's data, but it's always the data that is proprietary, which Danone remains the owner of. And then we come and enrich this data with our models, databases that are integrated into the platform. You have quite a lot of open source databases, and then there are others that are paid. And, you really need to view Darwin as an interface where we come in, we have our own models, but we also plug in a lot of existing building blocks. It's client data and third-party data, let's put it that way.
So the defensibility today, it comes from...
I don't think defensibility comes from data. I believe it comes in the short term from expertise, especially Antoine's. What we did was we built upon 10 years of his research. So it's not entirely straightforward. It also comes from the relationships we've been able to build in the sense that, for example, we have partnerships with consulting firms that also took quite a long time to establish. So I believe there's real defensibility there, but it also stems from, especially I think, our rapid execution speed, the fact that we iterate incredibly fast and we push out features incredibly fast. I honestly think I'm now convinced that, as you say, the moat, it's we're talking about data network effects, yes, but only in the long term. Whereas velocity, I believe, is a true source of short-term defensibility, more so than data itself.
And has AI changed your way of executing things over the last 2 years?
So AI has truly and completely changed our way of operating. We've always been quite steeped in AI, though. So even if we don't necessarily position ourselves as an AI company, we position ourselves as or at least historically, we've been a data company. And it so happens that AI has already been a part of our operations. We've been utilizing AI within our internal processes right from the very beginning of Darwin. And this actually makes it possible for us to operate with only 6 people in the entire company. So everything we do is scaled by AI. I'm alone in marketing sales, but that's because I use different agents to help me with what I do. Same with the code. Our engineers have really been leveraging cloud code for not just 2 months, but a year and a half. So I think we've been using it internally for a long time. And so regarding the product, we actually launched today, because it's Darwin's birthday, we launched our conversational agent named Charles in honor of Darwin. And it effectively adds AI components into the product in various places. So this can really help the consultant or the company to map taxonomies between their own data and our data. So it actually automates certain parts of the workflow. These are applications that are quite, we could say, obvious for an AI. And it also allows, and I find this extremely interesting, to interact with the software in a slightly different way, because historically, even with a top SaaS product, it's still the person who's in charge of entering the orders. So there's a question, the intentionality is with the user. And what we're developing our agent will actually allow, using natural language, to prompt the tool to say, create an organizational tree, create Danone's organizational chart. It has 3 BUs, create the bus, create the sites, and so on. So it's a whole new way to interact with the interface, in fact.
And are you selling it as a SaaS solution, or what's the exact business model you're using?
We sell it on a SaaS model. So for us, it's an annual subscription to the platform. So it's a SaaS model, yeah.
And you already have clients for this agent?
The agent won't be sold independently of the product. You really have to see it as a co-pilot for the product. So it won't be sold separately, but it does allow us to optimize the user experience across many modules.
So from the end customer perspective, what specific type of persona typically uses Darwin's tools?
So we have 2 types of end clients, businesses and financial institutions. Businesses, honestly, of all sizes. I think we won't be particularly relevant for very small businesses because we're not really focused on those areas yet. So it ranges from large SMEs to CRC 40 companies across quite diverse sectors. Well, obviously for primary or secondary sectors, the reliance on nature is quite clear, but we have more and more tertiary sectors, either through the digital footprint, which can be interesting, or once you have property because you have assets. And so it's also interesting to look at what's happening with physical risks. So that's for businesses and financial institutions. So we're really more focused. We tend to focus more on the unlisted side. So that's venture capital funds, private equity, real estate funds, infrastructure, and increasingly also on the side working with banks or major asset managers.
And for these actors, using Darwin will allow them to anticipate the risks posed by portfolio companies.
So what's interesting is that use cases vary quite a bit depending on the persona. So if I take, for example, financial institutions like a private equity fund, typically they'll focus on two types of use cases. One, I use Darwin to analyze an investment. So really in the due diligence phase, I want to invest in this company or this asset. Well, what is the risk associated with this asset? So does it impact my price? Does it impact my investment decision? Does this asset or this company have an ESG claim, a specific ESG claim? Typically, through my activities, I avoid so many tons of CO2 or water used. Well, we're going to quantify or substantiate that claim.
So that's the real due diligence phase.
And it can also be interesting to use Darwin post-investment then in the monitoring of the participation. So typically in the tracking of indicators related to nature and specifically to these impacts or risks in the deployment of an action plan or during the reporting phase. So that's more for fund use cases. And then for companies, so corporates, similarly, there are quite different use cases. The first use case, really, let's call it brand communication. So just as some companies 5 or 10 years ago differentiated themselves by saying, I'm the first in my sector to publish my carbon report, my decarbonization strategy. Well, actually, nowadays, it's no longer a strong differentiator to do that just on carbon. So you apply it to other pressures or to all pressures. So, we'll call that brand communication.
Who are the pioneering companies that, really are?
Well, then there are many food processing companies, honestly speaking. Also quite a few as soon as you have a reliance on sensitive raw materials, just textile, luxury. You have some really, really good examples in these sectors. Construction too, energy, once again, primary and secondary sectors. And they do it because in reality, it's either their investors who demand it, or it's more appealing to their investors, or for their value chain, or for the end consumer. So it's, I call it branding or communication, but it's generally linked to an interest at the end of their value chain, let's say more or less broad. So that's a use case. There's a second use case that's really about risks. It's I'm a food and beverage company. I'm a company in the luxury sector. My raw material prices have tripled for cashmere or coffee in the last 3 years. How do I measure, quantify my risk and reduce it? How does that impact my sourcing strategy? So we see many use cases for a responsible procurement charter to really understand how I can precisely manage this risk. And then there are other regulatory use cases, as we discussed earlier. It's truly about regulatory compliance. Or also an interesting example is that some companies, fortunately, have already taken action and have already implemented positive actions for nature. And so we will also allow not only to calculate and quantify the negative impact, but also the impact that has been avoided. And so we're going back to use case number 1, which is how you can quantify your avoided impact and put a number behind it that prevents any kind of greenwashing drift. And most importantly, what we're really trying to promote here is to avoid the trap of I have a biodiversity strategy just because I've put beehives on my factory roof. Which honestly, it can be, in fact, it's not necessarily such a good idea depending on where your factory is located, but it's a first way to raise awareness among your employees, but it's not, generally, it's really just a superficial effort versus working on your supplies, on your sourcing, especially on quite sensitive or biosourced raw materials. That's where there's really a significant impact, and that's where you truly make a difference.
And what is it that the most advanced companies have understood about these transformations?
Well, they understood that if they do nothing in 10 years, 25% of their revenue will just crumble. I think it's as simple as that. It's that, 25%, I think it can go up to 80-90%, or it could be less, depending on the industry and the company's market position. But I think they have understood that, unfortunately, we are evolving in a world that is increasingly under constraint, and that those who, well, it's Darwin again, but those who adapt the most rapidly are the ones destined to survive and to evolve successfully in this constrained future.
The major players in terms of carbon footprint, aren't they? Aren't they tempted to go down this path?
Regarding this topic?
Yeah.
Well, actually, yes, we have seen a few attempts. I believe that, and there are some who are beginning to really get into it, which is a good sign for us, because otherwise it wouldn't necessarily be all that positive. It's not that obvious because, in fact, it's not that close in the sense that, there are two big differences between an environmental or a biodiversity assessment and a carbon assessment. The first difference is carbon, or rather climate change. It's just one of the pressures on the environment, but there are 4 others. So we need to come and do everything we've done for carbon, but for these other pressures as well. So it's multidimensional. And what's more, how shall I put it? There are certain pressures that speak to each other. So it's an exercise that is much more complex. So that's the first difference. The second difference is that a biodiversity balance or a biodiversity footprint is localized. So that's the big difference between nature and climate. A ton of CO2 is fungible. It's the same ton of CO2, whether in China or Paris, whereas a cubic meter of water, if consumed in the Sahara or Paris, it doesn't have the same impact. Similarly, if you deforest a hectare of primary forest in Poland versus a forest in Normandy, it doesn't have the same impact. So there's always a need to actually localize these pressures and dependencies. And this is, it's important for the climate, obviously, but it's truly unique to biodiversity. And that makes the exercise much more complex because you really have to, how can I put it, once again, combine this footprint exercise with geospatial analysis and actually contextualize these pressures. So it's for these 2 reasons. These 2 reasons make it much more complex. Another reason, and this is where Antoine makes all the difference in a team like Darwin, is that nature, or rather biodiversity, it's a how shall I put it? It's a market that is much more emerging than climate. So the frameworks are not as well defined. There isn't a consensus that's as clear as on a metric like, say, a ton of CO2. There are now several metrics that interact with each other, some having advantages and disadvantages. So it's true that you still need a certain expertise to read and navigate through these different frameworks.
There are some debates about the proper reference points.
There are quite a few. There are debates mainly on the metric, but that's tied to the reference frame. What's happening, in fact, is that there are many expectations for a single metric that would be the equivalent of a ton of CO2 in carbon. And indeed, I think there's a portion of stakeholders who wish to have this single metric for biodiversity because that would simplify the problem. And it has a certain beauty. Even within a population of financial institutions, it allows scoring assets against each other, companies, comparing companies. But it's true that it's not that simple, because it's more complex. And I'm not sure we'll actually reach a world.
If it were a metric, what would it be?
Well, these are actually impact metrics. We offer several of them on the platform. Now we're getting into quite technical details, but there's a metric called MSA, the mean species abundance, and another one called PDF, which is potentially disappearance. Well, it's once again, it's biodiversity impact metrics, which come from, some from the LCA world. But I honestly think we won't converge on one metric, and that probably, in any case, what emerges from the frameworks is that it's really the pressures. So it's really the quantification of the pressures of the company on nature that is important. And what we at Darwin are promoting in any case is the flows, the quantification of physical flows. So it's really about reducing it to cubic meters of water used, hectares of land occupied, hectares of land converted, kilograms of pollutants emitted. So it's really, once again, these metrics that everyone understands. So there won't be just one, there will be several, at least 5, covering the 5 pressures.
But at least, there's that.
This, it acknowledges that biodiversity is complex and that we honestly probably won't find a consensus on a single metric. And it might be interesting, once again, to propose these aggregated metrics. And we do it on Darwin, but more as a compass rather than with the aim of linking a reduction trajectory to MSA or PDF, which is a bit unrealistic for most companies at this stage.
And aren't you criticized for oversimplifying for these particular data points? Or on the contrary, isn't it actually too complex for your clients?
Yeah, it's more the opposite in the sense that actually I think the aggregated metric, again, I see the appeal for an investor because it allows bringing everything down to one vector. So but it's very simplified. That's why it's generally criticized related to this element. We break it down, so it's more complex in absolute terms, but at the same time, it's also simpler because these are metrics everyone understands, actually. A factory manager, well, you talk to him about cubic meters of water, floor area, pollutants, he understands. You talk to him about MSA, frankly, he struggles to grasp it. So once again, we break it down, but we also simplify the message.
The 5 pressures.
The 5 pressures, yeah.
So these are the 5 pressures on the environment or on biodiversity.
So it's not a framework we invented. We're basing it on the IPBES framework. IPBES is like the IPCC for biodiversity. So there's indeed climate change, and there's the change in ecosystem use. That's the occupation and conversion of natural spaces. So it's everything related to deforestation, artificialization, and so on. You've got the overexploitation of natural resources like water or overfishing. You see, that's the 3rd pressure. Then there are invasive species. The best example, of course, would be the Asian hornet. It's when through your activities, you're going to move a species from what we might call its natural ecosystem to a completely different one. And the last pressure, which I always forget the last one, ecosystem use, that's pollution. So pollution of the soil, air, and water. So there you have it. So once again, we quantify your contribution as a company to these 5 pressures. It's somewhat about climate change again, but not only that.
So the client you're most advanced with today, who is that, and what are you doing with them?
We're working with Deloitte, Carbon4, Bell, Evolution, and Sahara. It's quite a diverse group, you know. And through these firms, we work with funds or companies. The names I can give you because they're public. For the companies, we held a lessons learned webinar with Cerelia and Clarins. So Clarins in cosmetics and Cerelia in agri-food about 3 weeks ago. So these are projects we did with Deloitte.
And you know what kind of consequence that has on the strategy of these end clients?
Yeah, well, we're right in the middle of the current topic, but it's quite interesting because actually you quickly get into, even if they're diagnostics and you're not yet working on developing an action plan, you quickly get into really specific business topics. So for a cosmetics company, it's really about reflections on the ingredients, that are used within the products, on the certifications of these ingredients, on the risks associated with these ingredients. For an agri-food business, it's all about farming practices. So what's the impact of switching all my wheat production to regenerative agriculture or organic? What impact does that have? Well, so it depends on the sectors, but it was, how should I put it, one of the most extremely interesting elements, actually, of the lessons learned from these projects. They actually get into action quite quickly. And I find that extremely positive. And the 2 elements, not surprising, but which were truly positive, were that in terms of collection time, it was incredibly fast for them. For example, Cerelia, it only took them 12 hours to collect the data we used. And it's true that that data, that's often one of the arguments we're given, that's provided by our prospects, like, it's the primary obstacle. It's, I just completed my carbon footprint assessment. Do I really want to launch another data collection exercise? That's going to take me 4 more months. So what we've created with Darwin is a super flexible data model where we can truly capitalize on what already exists. This includes your carbon footprint, your ESG report, your financial report. And once again, you give us, I'm exaggerating, of course, you give us your data and we have agents that allow us to match your data with our own taxonomies. So it's quite fast, actually. There are no more excuses not to take action and launch a nature footprint.
And you're currently working with all the consulting firms around here. How exactly did you manage to get in? How did you establish those initial partnerships right at the beginning?
So I think we've done something that's quite common in tech, which is to secure design partner contracts quite early in the product's life. So basically before the product even exists, because we knew that the product, while not taking 4 years to develop, still presented significant complexity in its methodology and interface development. So we decided not to spend 6 months hold up building the MVP completely detached from the market without actually confronting the reality of our users.
And so we very quickly actually surrounded ourselves with about 10 partner firms who helped us co-build the product. And honestly, among these 10 consulting firms, we have some of our very active users right now. And I think what interested them is the very innovative aspect of our value proposition, in the sense that a company that does carbon accounting, well, there are quite a few of them out there. It's a competitive market. A tech company that offers to create a nature footprint, a nature strategy, there are very few of them. So I think that was the very innovative aspect of the value proposition, which really caught their attention. And also there was truly the perspective of thinking that the market was in the process of becoming structured. I wanted to be a pioneer in this particular market and to differentiate myself from other consulting firms by investing quite rapidly in this subject.
What does this market look like today in terms of its value? Do we have an idea of the total amount of consulting services sold worldwide for nature-based topics?
Honestly, well, we have our. I think every consulting firm will have its own estimates, but it's not. And honestly, I think it's a bit too early to give a figure, a number, French or even at the European level. These are, in fact, projects whose pricing is quite variable, in the sense that you'll find, if I just consider the carbon footprint assessment, it can range from 15,000 to 200,000 euros. So obviously 15,000 would be for a small company, 200,000 euros. You'll be looking more at L'Oréal, LV, LVMH, and so forth. So there's a great deal of price variability, and there's significant price variation between different firms as well. And there's also a lot of variability, depending on what you include in the project, in the sense that there's the computational aspect, the diagnosis, but there's also the development of the action plan, the operational subject. So it's true that pricing is a real issue in this market because we really see all sorts of things, even contradictions. But it's also super interesting because it's structuring itself.
And how many players are there today in France and Europe doing the same as you?
In terms of the software component itself, well, in France, honestly, regarding our very specific approach, which essentially is we don't just focus on impact measurement, but we actually come alongside to support a consulting firm or a business on developing a nature strategy, a biodiversity strategy, with all the different building blocks that we propose. Honestly, it's not out of arrogance, but I truly believe we are the only ones. Of course, we do have competitors, but only on very specific parts of the tool, like the impact analysis, the risks. But for this 360-degree approach, honestly, in France, there are no other players. There are 1 or 2 companies in Germany and England, but again, they don't have the approach we have. They don't have this indirect approach that we've taken. So no, we are quite. Again, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but on our specific approach, we remain quite alone. Then again, with a direct approach, so I'm selling my software or my program directly to companies. There are other players for risk analysis. There are plenty of other players for impacts. There are other players. So again, I'm really talking about the Darwin approach, which is a strategy and direct approach.
And the fundraising with Asterion was that a year and a half
18 months,
ago?
yeah.
Yeah, and do you think it's going as fast as you would have liked?
Well, it's just that I think we ended up launching, in hindsight, during either the worst or the best year, in the sense that I believe that 2025, if you speak to any consultant, it was probably one of the most challenging years for the entire ESG market, and especially for ESG consultants. Well, in the sense that we've seen quite a few consulting firms close their doors. We've also witnessed many departures among the consultants themselves, and we've seen a lot of budgets cancelled or significantly cut back.
The sector of carbon footprint actors?
Yeah, it wasn't, and especially for our kind, the consultants, but at the same time, I imagine it also discouraged other competitors from entering the market. But the worst part actually wasn't even what some might have called an ESG backlash, a backlash ESG. The worst thing truly was the uncertainty. You see, concerning the CSRD specifically, the fact that there's a simplification, a scaling back on certain aspects of the CSRD, well, that's one thing, but it was this somewhat artistic vagueness for 10 months that I think really slowed down the market, because it's true that many companies just put things on hold before knowing exactly what was going to happen.
So once again, I think we really weren't helped by the market.
No, I think it's moving at the pace I had envisioned. We're very happy with where we stand, considering we commercially launched the product about 6 months ago. So we were quite quick with the deployment and development. And honestly, we're monetizing the product.
We have many projects ongoing. 2026 is starting well. So no, quite satisfied.
And how do you see the carbon assessment players? So your natural exit or partnership, would it be more with these actors or with a consulting firm?
Well, I think that honestly, we're not quite there yet. And I believe it will still be a few more years before we even begin to ask ourselves these kinds of questions. Looking ahead, if I project myself 5 to 10 years from now, honestly, we, in terms of potential buyers, I won't say we're spoiled for choice, but we could certainly be interesting. We'll see how we develop, but we could be quite appealing to different types of players. Actually, there's a consulting firm that wants to internalize the software tool or the technology, a carbon accounting company, which is a SaaS. Carbon companies looking to add a biodiversity module, a SaaS provider, an ERP system, like SAP, who would want to, and who have actually started acquiring some companies in the carbon space, who would specifically want to add that nature component, players in insurance, and also players in risk. It's pretty wide, basically.
How do you go about educating this market on a daily basis? You mentioned you're the one who handles the marketing functions, right?
So, first of all, regarding this, we are fortunate, and I truly believe it's a great opportunity. And that's what explains why I can still be operating alone on this at this stage, to be able to rely, in fact, on our partners. And that's also the advantage of this indirect approach, right? It's that, in fact, we have a fairly large network of partners who, in fact, raise awareness and train the market to a certain extent for us. So it's pretty cool to be able to rely on them, on their strength, their striking power, their marketing strength, on their contacts too,
What is it that actually works? What makes the final customer she decide to take the plunge and
I think what really works is the ability to get as quickly as you possibly can do an operational constraint that a company might be facing. I'll give you an example. I was recently on a call with a food processing company, and I was giving them a demo, a demonstration of the platform. And often what happens is I use some public data from the company to create a kind of simplified demo of its organization. So that's what allows them to project themselves a bit more, into the exercise, which has its advantages and disadvantages. Its advantages are that, in fact, it's more engaging because the company finds its sites, its raw materials, its activities, and that's great. And then the disadvantages are that sometimes you end up with quite precise questions about certain sites where, honestly, you have no idea. And so comes the demo moment where I had mapped the 4 or 5 factories of the company, and there was notably a factory located near Lille, so an area where you wouldn't really think there's a problem with annual precipitation. It was more in the north of France. And so I start reviewing the plant's spatial analysis, and by clicking a couple of things on the platform, I discover some water stress. So there's clearly a very strong water stress at this plant near Lille. So the CSR director, of course, starts saying, oh, but wait, this is surely a bug in your platform. Water stress near Lille, I don't believe it at all. So then I was like, wow. Obviously, I don't know that region of Lille. So then I explained to him, but from a somewhat theoretical point of view, what water stress means. So it's a function of supply and demand. So it's not just that you see, so already there might be a lot of water demand in that region, but I feel like that doesn't really convince him much.
And it turns out I'm fortunate enough to have the factory director on the call. And so the factory director then interrupts the CSR director and says, wait, I'm going to stop you right there. That doesn't shock me in the slightest, actually.
This summer, we received a call, in fact, from the town hall, from the municipality, which indeed said, there are droughts, and notably there's significant pressure on the water table. And since you are the largest company in the region, you will be the first to be impacted. So keep that in mind, because we could essentially cut off the water supply in August. And so he told him, yes, it's very relevant. We hadn't thought of it at all. So I was basically saved by the plant manager. And that's when I saw in the CSR director's mind his interest really light up, because it connected to
an operational constraint for the company, and I'll be able to step out of the ESG business unit and spread the word actually to other business units. And for me, I really find that when you or when I or the consultant manage to establish that connection with the business side, like operations, purchasing, finance concerning risks and so forth, that's actually when it truly converts, because that's where the budgets are, you see, in the background.
You might, for instance, sometimes present them with news articles that could be published regarding the exposure of practices detrimental to the environment in a specific region, to demonstrate to them precisely what the reputational risk would be for their website.
Well, I don't really do that myself. No, that's a really good idea.
Are you able to quantify the reputational risk based on their practices?
Exactly, based on, so we won't be focusing on reputational risks specifically. We'll localize it in a certain way, but we won't be at the plot or field level, but rather at the country or region level, because it's effectively generally linked to regulations. And regulations, well, generally, they're not different in two regions of France or in two specific river basins.
Well, yes, we can still be quite specific regarding the company's activities. But it's a good idea
to make this even more concrete.
Absolutely, yes. In any case, that's precisely the point. The more you make the exercise concrete and real, and the more you make tangible the risks involved in your interactions with nature, the more interest you actually generate, and the more you can secure a budget within the organization.
You were saying you have a VC background. Did you only do VC before starting?
No, before VC, I did strategy consulting. Like every good student, I started with a few years in strategy consulting in London.
And how do you go from VC to starting your own company? I mean, why didn't you stay comfortably you as a partner? You became a partner at 31, right?
Well, yes, I was a partner in my former fund. Well, I didn't, how should I put it? I didn't have an epiphany moment, with some fantasy of entrepreneurial adventure where I woke up as a child saying, I want to become an entrepreneur. Or, I had a morning waking up as a VC saying, I've discovered a secret. I absolutely have to launch myself into this. It was more of a gradual realization and actually...
Did the drive precede the idea? Or was it the idea that came before?
The drive preceded the idea, in the sense that for me, the frustration I had as a VC, you might have it too, was that I wanted to build, I was building within my fund, because indeed there was, like with Asterion, a whole logic of brand building. So I think you do build as a VC, but for me, it was still quite marginal, compared to a day of activity, you see.
What I like about Asterion is that I feel like we're building a new
exactly, but
model.
That's the thing.
That's where it connects with the investor activity and entrepreneurial activity. Huh?
Exactly. Honestly, I already had a bit of that in my background. So that nourished me for 7 years. But it's true that in the end, I found it too marginal compared to what I truly wanted to fill my days with. And besides, I honestly wanted to dedicate my time once again to something that made sense to me. So that's why I think the drive came before the actual idea. And then the idea itself, it emerged from some investments I had made, from conversations. I also had many friends in this market of impact and SaaS within the impact sector. So it came from this realization once again that carbon, well, it's only 14% of the problem and not the entire problem.
Well, and then I think there was also another thing related to that. And that, I believe, is also then connected to two elements.
I was raised, I don't know about you, but I was raised, especially early in my career as a VC, being told, well, a successful entrepreneur is a guy, he's an expert who knows a secret, you see. And actually, you really need to back these experts, or at least not necessarily experts, but at least these people who have a secret that no one else knows.
An insight.
Exactly. And honestly, I truly believed it, And then... actually, I think there were two developments, at least for me, that convinced me that honestly everything was possible and that it was possible for me. It was COVID and AI. COVID, because honestly, I think before COVID, you had a real issue with market access in the sense that networks were quite closed. It was complicated to meet someone. You had to meet them in person. So people weren't very keen on meeting someone, on giving an hour of their time in person to a stranger. So there was this issue of market access and also more restricted access to information. And I find that post-COVID, everyone is, many people already were, but taking an hour on Zoom is just so much easier. So access has really multiplied, I think. So it was, for me, it was really easier to build a network in a new market. And secondly, well, indeed, there was, an information flow that was also much more fluid with the LLMs and AI. And so I find that this adage or paradigm of saying I need to back someone who has this insight or this secret, I think it's lost a bit of its meaning at that point, where actually other qualities have come to be valued, I find. And so I told myself, well, I don't necessarily have a secret that no one else knows.
You did have the insight of your associate with his methodology.
Of course, but we went out and found that. That is to say, basically, at the very start of the company, Cyprien and I began to think about this biodiversity topic with this intuition, more than a secret, which was to say, essentially, we need to do more than just carbon. And then it turned out that we looked a bit at what was being done in the market. Like everyone else, we started the process by making a big effort of what you call user discovery, where you literally go and question 150 people in the market to ask them, tell me about your life and what are your needs and your challenges. And that's how actually we stumbled upon the model Antoine developed, so the GBS, and we literally found Antoine's name on a GitHub repo where we see Antoine Vallier, and then we thought, who is Antoine Vallier? And that's how it happened.
And actually, it's quite funny because we were looking recently, there's a LinkedIn message that I sent him, in March, which is, hi, my name is Aurore. We're exploring the biodiversity market. We saw what you were doing on GBS. Super interesting. Do you want us to, are you available for a call or something?
And Antoine, he was well off at the Caisse de Dépôt, right?
He had already left. And basically he had left 2 years before that, and he was a freelance consultant working on nature-related subjects. He had quite a few projects going on.
So he was already somewhat entrepreneurial.
Exactly, he was already independent.
So it was easy to convince him to come and join you?
Easy to sway him.
Yeah, I think what really, actually, you should ask him, but I think what truly attracted him was the idea of saying to himself, I'll be able to work on a topic which he's passionate about, because he did dedicate, I believe, 7 or 8 years of his life to it at the Caisse de Dépôt, but with a different toolkit, in the sense that we truly provided him with the tech toolkit, which he hadn't had at all at the Caisse de Dépôt. So it was really about delving deeper and with a different approach into what he had done for 8 years.
And would you say that his perspective on the subject has really shifted since he joined Darwin? Is it that feedback loop with the clients that
I don't think his perspective really changed, in the sense that what was interesting is that, in fact, he had both roles, that of a modeler. So he was the one who had actually created the model. So he provides the methodological building block. And he also wore the consultant's hat, because he had also spent 2 years, in fact, essentially selling the methodological approach. Well, I think that regarding the methodological aspect, his perspective hasn't really changed, in the sense that we don't do precisely the same thing as GBS, so we can't truly compare ourselves in an isolated way. But I don't believe the methodological approach has changed. For us, it's just that we emphasize much more. We highlight the pressures, as I was telling you, more than the aggregated metric. But I wouldn't say there was a clear-cut black and white change on that point. And similarly, regarding the client's needs, I believe he merely confirmed, in essence, the challenges or difficulties he himself had experienced as a consultant. So no, I honestly don't think so. On the contrary, I think it actually confirmed some of the intuitions that he already had.
And I think, anyway,
I think, because we talked about it recently, that he underestimated, but I'd say I think it's also the case for Cyprien or me. We perhaps also underestimated the speed of evolution of tech and AI, and to what extent we would be able to capitalize also on these new tools to precisely, in fact, optimize and automate the user experience. So I think the discovery is more about that than the business side, which honestly has been stable since Darwin began.
And so the individuals you've brought on board and those you're planning to recruit in the future, has this also led you to reconsider your approach to the kind of expertise you're looking for? Because there are so many tasks that you can now automate and perform in a much more efficient way.
So for the moment, we actually took a bit of a gamble on our recruitment strategy. What we did was we brought in engineers who from the very beginning were already quite senior.
So that's really one of the best. We decided to recruit fewer, but very senior profiles. And honestly, it's the best bet we've ever made, especially now, because it was a gamble. Now it was a gamble 2 years ago, but it's obvious now because a good or experienced engineer with AI, their striking power is multiplied. So actually now it's as if he has 6 interns. So it's actually the disadvantage of having a senior 4 years ago who was, maybe he'll be, I don't know, he might go slower on certain things. You see, you could hire 2 juniors instead, you see. Well, actually now you don't have that drawback anymore. So basically the market's evolution has only reinforced this bet. For us, in terms of recruitment, since the very beginning of Darwin, we've been very focused on technical hires, so exclusively back-end and front-end engineers. Just recently, we hired someone for the data and AI side. So these are truly engineers working on the product, on the technology. And at this point, I think it's really essential that we bring in our first sales hire. So that for sure will evolve over the next few months.
And today your clients, are they primarily in France, or do you also operate in other European countries?
Well, for us, we actually built Darwin right from the very beginning as an international company, in the sense that our product is entirely in English. The documentation is also in English. Everything is in English. All of Darwin's written culture is in English.
Are the 6 of them French or what?
All 6 of them are French. So but we actually have an informal rule that states that on Slack, the language used is predominantly French. So it's for all the somewhat daily casual exchanges. And as soon as we actually switched to GitHub or Notion, which are essentially our operating systems, you could say, for the various components of Darwin, we find that everything is in English. But that's actually quite a common practice within the tech industry in general. But therefore, Darwin is structured and built as an international company. There's little product localization to do. So that was a good discovery as well, in the sense that we're dealing with reference points that are at least European or global. So we were talking about metrics, pressures, regulatory frameworks, all of that. It's not French. So no, there's no reason to limit ourselves to France. However, France is a very interesting country because it's a country that on biodiversity topics is actually quite pioneering and advanced. It's the country where precisely Antoine was able to develop his model. So it's a very interesting country in that regard. And on the topic of ESG, more generally speaking, after that, we are indeed beginning to acquire clients, specifically in neighboring countries, such as the Benelux area, or increasingly Anglo-Saxon clients. What we're not really considering too much at the moment, because honestly, in this particular instance, we found it's a bit more, well, Trump's election, to be honest, didn't really help to convince us that we should go there to the US, in the sense that I believe it's a market which, let's just say, similarly, perhaps in a rather specific, I truly hope, in a more temporary and a little less appealing at the present time regarding these topics, even though having discussed it with quite a number of key players, especially those within the climate sector who sell a great deal in the US. Actually, the situation isn't so negative, in the sense that you have, in fact, the more Trump basically says nonsense about climate change, the more you have a polarization of civil society, where you have companies like Patagonia, you see, so you have big examples, exactly, who take the opposite stance. Yeah, exactly. So it's a, honestly, and since it's a monstrously large market, in fact, you don't need 50% of companies to be convinced. You can actually have a small sample, but they are very committed. And for us, that's enough to make a quite interesting market.
What has surprised you most since the beginning, positively and negatively?
So you mentioned the year 2025, which was hard, but
yeah, that's so. Yes, but that I mean, it didn't surprise me. It didn't surprise me in the sense that when we started Darwin, we thought we'd have 2. We're a bit early, you know. It was a conscious decision. It was to tell ourselves, it was probably to say the market isn't going to explode in the next 6 months. We know we're early to market, but that's not a problem, because it will also give us the time to do things properly and to build a methodology, a product that is robust, that really holds up. Well, that wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't a huge surprise for me. No, what really surprised me, I'm just thinking, it's the fact that ultimately, I'm not entirely sure if it's, ultimately, the profession of an entrepreneur isn't all that different from that of a VC, in the sense that, or then again, I suppose each venture capitalist has a rather unique way of approaching their work, you know. But it's true that I'm finding, everyone used to tell me that, you'll see when you become an entrepreneur, your mental burden won't be the same at all. And it's true, you know, but I find that you can recognize some of the elements. You see, especially when you live your VC life quite intensely, as is the case for some VCs, and that was a bit my situation. You recognize there are certain elements. So, of course, when you're a VC, it's not your core, or for me, it happened to be a bit my core too. So I recognize some elements.
And for you, I guess it's the same, but it's not, many people told me, you'll see it's super different and all.
Well, I kind of find these elements of, especially when you're a CEO, where you actually have to handle everything and you must build operational expertise really, really quickly, because essentially no one else but you can do these things, because everyone else has their own work streams or their specific operational responsibilities, So you've got this side, you've really got this side, I need to be in a somewhat permanent sales process. I'll have to cover many different topics. I have no idea, but I don't have a choice. And tomorrow I'll have to become a pro at accounting, write a financial report, or do a podcast on LinkedIn. So there you go. It's quite interesting, because I find that, well, there are many differences, you see, but there's also this element. I find some of my traits that I had as a musician too.
What's hardest for you?
Well, honestly, right now, it's really quite fun in the sense that for me, that's actually also one of the reasons why I do it, in the sense that my primary driver, my main motivation is pleasure. And then for me, I'll find pleasure in the act of solving a complex problem. I'll find pleasure in the fact of trying to have a positive impact on the world. I'll find pleasure in being surrounded by people I've chosen, people who inspire me and that I genuinely like. But all of these things are sources of pleasure for me, you see. I'm not doing this for the greater good, and I'm obviously just kidding. But no, honestly, I find it fun. I think there's a lot of enjoyment, but then it never stops. It never stops in the sense that it's all day, in the evening, on weekends. But once again, that's not really a new discovery. I mean, when you really get into this and you start to see this kind of blur between your personal and your professional life, as a musician, you experience that too.
Yeah, I get it.
So in any case, I'm still lucky to come from a background that was already quite open. So that's why it didn't drastically affect my life, You see, it's a bit. I think it's important that the end goal exists, and that you go and seek it, the objective, why you're doing it, and all. But I truly believe the journey itself is just as crucial. If you're not having fun doing it, honestly, you won't last. Honestly, since you practically do nothing else, if you don't find joy in 80% of your day, you won't be able to sustain that marathon.
One last word, something we haven't talked about.
What is it that we haven't really touched upon yet? You've certainly asked me a great many questions. No, I don't think so. What else could I possibly add at this point? We've already covered the team and the market situation. Oh no, I'm quite excited about the agent we're launching and that we have here, because it is indeed the big announcement of the day. Otherwise, a final topic we haven't touched upon, which is a very current event for the market, one that has really stirred up the ESG nature market, but you might be a little further removed from that particular market. This is a new report from IPBES, which was just released this past Monday. And it stated, it confirms something that we've actually known for quite some time, but it's really good that they've confirmed it in such a clear way that nature-related risk is a systemic threat to the economy, and all businesses are indeed affected. So I believe that this is...
We needed a report for...
I don't know if we really needed a reminder, but I think it's quite good that IPBES re-emphasized it, because all businesses are affected, you see. We're talking about, you know what I mean? It's a level of impact that's quite different from just agricultural businesses. There's a significant risk for this kind of enterprise, you see. No, I think it is. Even if, once again, these aren't exactly new information. I think it's a report that is quite important, because it serves to reiterate, and we are still, unfortunately, still in the phase of raising awareness and providing training.
Okay, thanks.
Good.